About 3 weeks ago, Startup Nation Central hosted in Israel 250 VCs from over 30 countries around the world. And what I said to them at their opening session is that a lot of things about the country you have landed in don't add up. We're a tiny country. We started in a geographic place that had little or no natural resources and in a not very welcoming neighborhood. Fast forward 70 years later, we have 6,000 startups. Now, what I also like to say about Israel is that Israel itself is a startup. So if you think, what is a startup? It's really just an idea that no one thinks is going to work, and most people think is a crazy idea. And if you add to that idea a lot of grit and determination and a willingness to take risks, a lot of things which we heard about on this stage earlier today, a nation was born. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the numbers and some of the root causes of the Startup Nation story. So as I said before, it's 6,000 startup. It's the highest density of startups of any country in the world. Now, there are rankings and various indexes that are published every year that really illustrate Israel's stellar positioning globally in terms of our innovation ecosystem. This one comes out at the World Economic Forum in Davos every year. And here we are ranked third out of 137 countries. This is based on many different indexes in terms of ability to attract talent, ability to attract capital, etc. Now, if you look back here, there's not a single delegation that doesn't ask the question, what's with Switzerland? So Switzerland is there because it has a unique strength in a specific sector, and that sector is pharmaceuticals. When you look at Israel, we have some unique strengths in many sectors. And a lot of these get hot and hotter and rise and get global attention. One of the ones that's obviously, standing here in Beersheba, I cannot not mention this, that today 16% of global investment in cybersecurity companies is coming to Israel. Another one that's really heating up lately is industrial IoT, which is all the innovation around manufacturing. And there's something like 11% of global investment is coming to Israel. This is an OECD ranking that talks about the percentage of GDP that a country is investing in R&D, okay, exclusive of military. So just to give you a way to think about it, we're a tiny country, so you have to take this in perspective. But Israel spends 4.38% of our GDP on R&D, and the U.S. is about 2.77%. This is another one that I think is particularly strong. It was true when the book came out about 9 years ago, still true today. Israeli companies are attracting more venture per capita than companies in any other country. Now, these are some of the recent M&As. I think that a lot of them are well known in this room. And really, this is here just to show the increasingly strong footprint that global corporates are coming to Israel with. We heard earlier from Asaf about Microsoft. The typical pattern is that a corporate will acquire an Israeli startup and use that as the basis for its R&D center. So there are just over 300 R&D centers here, and many, many other models, by the way, for corporates to come base themselves in Israel. The only reason that a multinational tends to set up in another country is the market. So guess what? There's no market here. And then you could say another reason that a corporate will set up abroad is because it's a regional hub, like Singapore, like Dubai. So guess what? We are not a regional hub. In fact, we're even somewhat isolated in the region. The only reason that all of these companies are coming to set up here, and it's at a place like Ben-Gurion University that's more appropriate than any to say that, is to look for the talent. So the question is, what is going on here? I'm going to come back to Beersheba specifically in a moment, but for now I'm going to stay macro. What's going on in Israel that is creating such a magnetic pull by corporates and governments from around the world? So really, this is a picture that can apply to Israeli innovation and its connectivity to the world since our founding. So when you talk about the 40s and 50s, the innovation here was coming from a place of need. I'm going to even say critical need. And there were problems in the area of food and agriculture and medicine and defense that had to be solved and resulted in innovative solutions. I'm going to say team building, another thing that Asaf Rappaport spoke of earlier. And then our ability to test, adopt, and fail, and test, adopt, and fail. And indeed, both Asaf and Ran spoke about our ability to tolerate failure and have it even be part of the entrepreneurial cycle, definitely something Israel is known for. What happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s is that we started to export some of the solutions that we came up with to some of our most critical problems. And then the change came really in the 90s and into this century, where we started to think, well, gee, we have an ability to do all this. We don't have enough problems. Now, most people don't think of Israel as a place that's looking for problems, but Israeli entrepreneurs are indeed looking for problems. And then really began a cycle where we started to look around the globe for other countries and other companies' problems that we could solve. This is a what I like to call an X-ray of the Israel's startup ecosystem. You've got the VC funds, which I mentioned earlier, incubators, accelerators, and I'm going to add co-working spaces, because all of those come under the category of early stage support vehicles. The R&D centers, the universities, and of course the TTOs, which is becoming an increasingly important part of the connectivity to the ecosystem. It's in that context that I first met Donna, actually, when she was at Hebrew University. So if I had to summarize, again, I'm still on the macro, I'm still talking Israel overall. If I had to summarize the story, it is a remarkable ecosystem, a lot of tech talent, and a tiny market. Now, Startup Nation was born, Startup Nation Central was born, because the minute that an Israeli startup opens its doors, its conversation is with overseas markets. And we understood that there needed to be connectivity between all these extraordinary tech innovations and markets around the world. Now, we're really doing that in two ways. The first is we launched a platform, which is essentially a mapping of the entire innovation ecosystem in Israel. We have almost 6,000 innovative companies, all the TTOs, all the VCs, and all the R&D centers. And anything you want to search is eminently searchable, will bring you to an entire category of startups on a specific topic. If you punch in cherry tomato innovations, you'll get all the startups and all the technologies around cherry tomato innovation. It has turned out to be an extraordinary tool. It's both online and free, that we're starting to see corporates from around the world and governments from around the world that want to actually connect in Israel with Israeli innovation, pre-selecting the startups that they want to meet with when they come here while they're back home. Okay? Last year alone, in the first 11 months of 2017, we had 2 million hits on the Finder. It's called Startup Nation Finder. In fact, we're now starting to share the methodology with other countries that want to do a similar mapping of their ecosystems. I can't help myself, but I just want to issue an invitation to every startup in the room, including to the 3 finalists that we're going to hear about more in about an hour, to have a look and see if you have a page in the Finder. If you have a page, if your page is updated, because as I said, the traction here is more and more. And then the second piece of what we're doing is still in the realm of connectivity is we are hosting large companies and certain government leaders and some academics and some NGOs from around the world that want to connect here to solutions to some of their specific tech problems. This is just one that I threw up here because it was a great story of a huge conglomerate from India that deals with smart homes. We hosted their global CEO. They were looking for a very specific technology. We connected them to many, but the one where there was a real hit was a tiny, tiny startup in Haifa, which had 2 Arab and 2 Jewish co-founders. And a match was made, and now there are going to be millions of homes in India that have the technology of MindoLife. And again, I will note that MindoLife was very updated in our Finder. So now I want to take everything I said until now and go to the point of our gathering here today, which is Startup Nation-wide. How to make sure that this strong and flourishing tech ecosystem flourishes beyond Gadara to Hadera. Here are some of, again, based on the data from the Finder, here are some examples of startup ecosystems that are starting to flourish in other parts of the country. Obviously, Beersheba is a great example where 5 years ago, there were, I want to say, under 50 startups, and now you have about 120 with over 2,500 tech workers here. If I want to spend just a minute on how entrepreneurs and what I call aggregators or ecosystem builders in other cities can think about the way to get their ecosystem to grow and to flourish. In my mind, a big piece or the flashpoint for that process is, what is your story? One of the things that they say writ large today about a tech company is that it's really good if you have a game-changing and disruptive technology, but if you can't tell your story, it's not going to go anywhere. And I will make the same case about a city's ecosystem. So in Beersheba, the people who built the ecosystem that is both flourishing and continuing to rise understood early on that a big strength in Beersheba obviously is the cyber sector, and here's some of the data from TechSheva that early on were branding what are the natural strengths of this region, whether it's academia, the move of the IDF to the south, the very active and very supportive City Hall, and then some of the large corporates globally that looked at Israel and decided this is where we're putting our boots on the ground. Obviously, EMC Dell being at the head of that pack. So here is some of the growth that you see in the startups in Beersheba. And similarly in Jerusalem, there the strengths that the Jerusalemites chose to focus on in the early days of branding were the strength of the community, the creation of actual startups, and then the events and the physical space and the hackathons and so on. I'll be done in a second. Okay. So here is similarly, if you look at the growth in the last 5 or 6 years in Jerusalem, a lot of you'll see a lot of that same data point. And what I want to leave you with is anyone that is looking at their city's ecosystem really should think about it on 3 levels. And in fact, when Startup Nation Central as an organization started to look either Tel Aviv, obviously, but even a city like Jerusalem, we looked at it in three levels. First of all, what can be done to strengthen the city within and of itself? A lot of that has to do with community building, has to do with creating events, has to do with creating resources that will draw a global audience. And then, ein ma lagid, the connectivity to the center of the country is a critical piece of the story. We're starting to see more and more of it because organizations like Tech Sheva, like Made in JLM, like our friends in Haifa, like the Hybrid in Nazareth, are starting to understand that in today's world, the ramp up of that connectivity is a key part of making that happen. I also want to notice here, I have to give a shout out to, apart from all the NGOs that are doing this, there are also companies that are starting to set up in multiple cities around Israel. My joke about WeWork, because we're waiting for them to open in Jerusalem, is that they are building these buildings and they can't build them fast enough. I know that the Creator Awards event is one of their big events coming up on June 20th, where they hope to attract a lot of entrepreneurs from multiple cities around Israel, and that's a great example of actually a corporate that is bringing together people from different communities. And then finally, and this is not to be excluded, is the ability to take your story, identify the strengths of your ecosystem, identify the challenges of your ecosystem, and once you identify the ognim, the anchors that you want to work off of, and the challenges that need to be addressed, then you want to think about how to ramp up the connectivity with the rest of the world. With that, it is an honor to be here, and I thank you and wish you the best of luck.